Hey everybody, Questwise here, and today we're going to try to start a series that's kind of unique, at least unique to my channel. I don't know if this is, I've seen a few other YouTubers do some kind of things like this, but uh, uh, I've teamed up with a fellow YouTuber and a friend, Johnathan Baldridge, and we're going to try to tag team a review of this Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. This is the 4th edition, this is the newest edition. It's put out by Cubicle 7 Entertainment out of England, I believe. This is the newest edition of the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and we've been discussing kind of privately how much we love this game and how cool this game really is. And so what we wanted to try to do is do like a tag team review, which means we're going to break the book down into sections, and we're each going to do a video on those sections, and then once we cover the entire book individually, we're going to come together and do a joint video together where we discuss the entire book itself and what we enjoy most about it and our thoughts and that kind of stuff on the project as a whole. So it's going to be kind of a unique thing where we're each doing videos based upon certain sections of the book, and then we'll come together at the end to do this. So it'll probably be about a 3 to 4 part series, with maybe a 5th, last one tagged on, where we discuss the thing together as a whole in one video for you, for your viewing enjoyment as well. I wanted to start off, today we're going to talk about the very beginning part of the book. So we're going to talk about characters, and we're talking about classes and careers, skills, and talents, which is the first part of basically character creation part of the book, and then we'll go on from there. Next week we'll discuss the second part of the book as well. But I wanted to give you a little bit of background, my personal background with Warhammer Fantasy. When I went off to college, just before I went off to college, a friend of mine named Trevor had started to play Warhammer 40K, and at that point it was still the old Rogue Trader days, and he had a bunch of these Space Marine Terminator miniatures. They had a box set that came out. And just before I went off to college, he sold them to me. I think I paid maybe $20, $25 for this box set. And I know that this box set today is worth a buttload of money. No, I do not no longer own those miniatures anymore. But what sparked the whole thing is when I went off to college, I really didn't know much about the game. And back in those days, it was sort of a weird blend of miniature gaming with role-playing in this Rogue Trader sort of book that came out. So I didn't really understand how any of that worked, but I did sort of display the miniatures when I was in college on my bookshelf. And a few of my other classmates had, would come over and visit. We'd hang out and play D&D and stuff. And they saw these miniatures and they got really interested in them. So we went down to our local game store in a place called Ypsilanti, Michigan, which is just outside of Ann Arbor, where we were in college, and we found out that this game had really kind of exploded, and we began to buy we jointly bought a rule starter box, and then we bought some rule books, and then we bought miniatures, and we started our own armies, which was great and all, but I was really much more a fan of fantasy, and I realized that they had a Warhammer Fantasy Battles, which is the miniature line of this game. And so I bought very heavily into it. And it wasn't until I actually kind of came back from college to begin to play hardcore this game, this Warhammer Fantasy Battles. At that point, I also discovered that there was a role-playing game that had come out. I didn't jump into the role-playing game until 2nd edition. I never had any experience with 1st edition. But I had the Warhammer Fantasy Role-Playing 2nd edition for quite a long time, and I was really blown away by the concepts that were in there as a role-playing game. Up until that point, I had only played like D&D, the old Star Wars D6, and a lot of Palladium games as well too. And so I was really blown away by the fact of this idea of percentile systems, and it just seemed to click with me. It seemed to really make sense to me. So I never played Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 3rd edition at all. I know that was a Fantasy Flight thing. That was the first time that they sort of incorporated their sort of narrative dice system that they use now for like Star Wars and a bunch of other games now, Legend of the Five Rings, that kind of stuff. But when Cubicle 7 had announced that they were going to bring back Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and they had received the license after Fantasy Flight had lost it, and they were going to bring back, sort of harkening back to the old first and second edition days, I was super excited. I wanted to check this out. I love the lore and the depth of the old world, right? I love that sort of gritty, grim, dark sort of setting, but at the same time, there's an era of kind of campiness and humor mixed in there as well, too. And by campiness and humor, I mean there are things like you could start off playing a character that's a rat catcher, that is a farmer. There's that idea that sort of everybody sort of has a normal person kind of vibe, but in a very gritty world full of demons and heretics and chaos mutations and cultists and all this kind of stuff. But at the same time, there's that campiness of like, I'm in this world of crazy chaos, magic, stuff going on, and witch hunters and the Inquisitions and stuff. But I'm playing a rat catcher. What do I have that I can ever sort of appeal to the world as at large, and how can I become an adventurer and a hero? There's also things like some of the races, the funny idea that there are orcs, which are massive, crazy beings. There are goblins, but there are also these things called snotlings. And yes, there are called snotlings. These crazy little lesser goblins that kind of come en masse and devour and destroy everything in their path. So there's a lot of grim, dark grittiness to the world, but there's also a little bit of campiness. And so you can play it however you want, which I really appreciate from a game like Warhammer. Has a years and years of background and lore behind it. In this game, the book itself sort of focuses on one region of the Warhammer Fantasy world, and that would be the Reichland, which is sort of like a imperial Germanic sort of setting. Everything has sort of Germanic names and feel to it as well. And then the Reichland itself, the Kingdom of the Reichland, and all the areas that sort of surround it. So you're still going to get a very big amount of stuff that you can play with, but I am assuming that Cubicle 7, having seen what they do with like the One Ring and several of the other games that they produce, that we're going to see books that sort of expand the world, as it were. I would love to see the jungles of the Lizardmen. I think that would be really, really cool setting as well too. But the main focus of the core rulebook is the Reichland itself. But we're also going to get to see things like, and we'll get into the classes and stuff here as well too. You get things like, they call them species rather than races. We see humans, dwarves, halflings, high elves, and wood elves, which are really interesting. There's a division between the high elves and the wood elves. Specifically, the only sort of species you get for humans are the Reichlanders, which is fine because that's the main focus of the book. But there's a lot of stuff in there that you get to sort of play with. Interestingly enough, what they do is they break down the classes into classes and into careers within those classes. The classes themselves are academic, burghers, which are townsfolk, basically, people who live in cities, courtiers, peasants, rangers, riverfolk, rogues, and warriors. And then built into each one of those are dozens and dozens and dozens of other careers that fit within each one of those classes. To me, that's fascinating. To me, that means that there's so many choices. And here's what's the kicker about this book, and another one of the things that's kind of campy about it, but I really, really enjoy. You can create any character you want within those, dozens and dozens and dozens of different careers within those classes. But the game rewards you if you randomly roll what your character will become. So you get to choose if you want to, but you get an XP bonus if you roll randomly on a table, which could mean that you could fall into being a halfling rat catcher or a human farmer. Well, those kind of things can happen when you roll randomly. You're not really sure what you're going to get. To me, that's fascinating. I know a lot of people don't like that sort of lack of control when they're creating a character, But to me, I love that kind of thing. I love being able to just randomly create a character and then step into playing that specific character. Now, there are a lot of questions at the end of the character creation session that help you flesh out that character. So even though it's random when you roll up the character, there are some really cool questions at the end that sort of help you flesh out where that character came from, what that character really does, what they know, that kind of things, connections they might have with other players or NPCs. And so you get a little bit more of a control around a character that you just randomly created. Again, like I said, my own honest opinion, I love that kind of stuff. I love coming up with a random character and being like, okay, how can I role play this character? How can I stretch my sort of acting or improv skills into creating a character or playing a character that I didn't have really full control over creating. And to me, that gives me a lot of excitement and fun in the game as well too. You are not meant to be heroes in this game. You're not meant to be, this is a grim and gritty world where your whole life is is trying to survive disease and to try to stay fed and to pay for things. And so you become adventurers more than you really become heroes, as it were. At some point, you may become a hero. You might defeat some kind of chaos incursion or a Skaven uprising, and in that you might become a local hero. But it's never really meant to be destined that you're going to become these world-renowned heroes that everybody looks up to and eventually worships as gods or whatever, saviors. You will always sort of be grim and gritty. And that's the other great thing about this. And we'll get into this later in the next video where we talk about combat. But we'll talk about things like how gritty this combat system and how deadly the system can be. You also have characteristics when you're creating a character. These are unique as well too. If you've ever played Warhammer 40,000 or Warhammer Fantasy Battles, most of these will seem very, very, very familiar to you. What they would call stats in other games or statistics or attributes, they call characteristics in this game. You're going to have things like weapon skill, ballistic skill, which is shooting weapons. There are guns in this game. We'll get into that later when we get into combat and gear and trappings and stuff. You have strength, you have toughness, you have intelligence, you have agility, dexterity, initiative, willpower, and fellowship. Now, and fellowship would be a lot like your charisma-based kind of things, how you interact with other people. So each career has 4 paths that you can take. So you start off in the entry-level part of this career, and you make your way sort of through these paths. As you gain experience and stuff, it unlocks more and more things that you can do. You can also leave your career if you've decided that you don't want to be a rat catcher anymore. If you have the correct skills and stuff, you can move into other careers. It makes it feel much more organic, sort of like in life, where you're not sort of stuck into, being a truck driver your entire life. If you aspire to be other things and you have the right amount of skills and ability to do so, you can go on to, become a lawyer if you want, to study law or some kind of thing in that respect as well too. So you're not stuck with the career that you're given when you roll up a character. There are choices, there are availabilities to move into other things, and that can grow organically in the game as well too. So as you're doing things in the game, you might start off as a farmer and then gravitate more into the rogue type of a character class where you've gone on to steal things to survive, and then later maybe redeem yourself and become a witch hunter and decide that you're going to go off and fight chaos and stuff as well too. There are skills and talents. These are what you would expect from any other game. Talents are a lot like feats in D&D or Pathfinder. Those ideas that are tons of different skills and it's a very skill-based system where you will use your attribute most of the time, your characteristic most of the time to determine what you need to roll under. It's a like I said, percentile, so it's a roll under equal or to or under your skill or your characteristic. If you have a skill, every skill is attached to a characteristic, and anytime that you gain skill ranks, you sort of add to the base of what the characteristic is, to make you a little bit better. So, for instance, you might have, might use strength to climb something, but if you have ranks in the climb skill, you would roll your climb skill because you're actually better at that, because strength applies to other things as well too, forcing open doors, a multitude of other things. So it's interesting that the skills sort of build off of your core characteristics as well too. And I love the fact that it really makes sense to me that if you have a 45% chance to climb, you kind of instinctively know that, yeah, I'm okay at that, but I'm not the best. Maybe I should add some stuff to it to help me. I should use a rope. And your numbers can vary depending on the condition or the things that you're using to help. So a rope might increase your skill 10%, but if the wall is slippery and wet, it might decrease it by 20. So there's some variation in that as well too. And reading through the book, it seems very well written in the respect that it all makes sense to me. I think this is an easy game that would be easy to teach, as well as it's very easy to learn. The learning curve in this is not, I would say it's average in its sort of steepness. Not like games like Burning Wheel, which have a very, very steep learning curve. I think I would call this average at best. But that's a quick overview of the first part of the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay core book. Like I said, next week we'll go into the second section, which I believe is combat and trappings and armor and weapons and stuff. But like I said at the beginning of this video, this is a joint sort of review between myself and Johnathan Baldridge. I will link down below to his page so you can go and check out his review when he gets it posted as well too. And we're going to keep doing this back and forth until we reach the finality of the book, and then we will come together and hopefully do a sort of joint review of the entire project. Until next time, I am Questwise, and I am out.